All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
I'm Garrett Bergquist, government reporter for Wish TV and the producer of All Indiana Politics. Although Congress once again averted a government shutdown at the last minute earlier this month, the government is only funded through September 30th. Indiana Congressman Marlin Stutzman is a member of the House Budget Committee, so he's in the thick of those negotiations. I sat down with him to talk about which cuts are on the table and which are not. We also talked about the potential impact of the Department of Defense's civilian job cuts and a bill he's filed to put a time limit on federal regulations. With us now is Congressman Marlin Stutzman. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So the federal government is now funded through September 30th. What are you looking for between now and then to be a yes vote on the spending plan?
Well, we've got a lot of work. We've passed the reconciliation portion out of the Budget Committee, which I serve on, and now that goes to the Senate. The Senate's got to do their work, but our committees of jurisdiction in the House will start breaking down each of those particular line items that they've been assigned to meet certain numbers. So we've got probably 2 months or so of committee work, and then we'll be getting those bills to the floor to get the final budget passed by the end of September. So we've got a lot of work. Summer's going to move fast, but we've never seen anything like this in Washington, with President Trump coming in with a mindset of reform and saving dollars and getting back to a balanced budget. And as a budget hawk, I've always been preaching that same message, and I'm glad that President Trump wants to return our federal government back to balanced budgets.
Right now, based on where the Republican caucus is, where do you think we will most likely see cuts?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse that we are seeing from the DOGE team and the work that Elon Musk is doing, which we've never seen anything like this. And it's gone back all the way to President Obama. He used to talk about the campaign to eliminate waste, and to actually have a team focused strictly on when the funding goes out, where is it going, and to have that information not only for us as members of Congress, but also to the American people, is a huge advantage. It's information that we haven't been able to get our hands on before, and now that we're seeing funding going to Afghanistan for programs at DEI, or to a Sesame Street program in Iraq for $20 million. Just think what $20 million could do right here in a town in Indiana. It would make a huge impact. And so there's line item after line item. And one of the other big interesting points that Elon Musk was sharing with us members of Congress is that about $1 billion goes out every hour from the U.S. Treasury. And he said many of those transactions didn't even have a code or an explanation of where the funding was going to go. And so those are changes that are happening. And so I tell you what, I mean, we as the American people should be very grateful that somebody is actually finally getting that information, because we know that money is being used in places that the taxpayer would not be happy with.
Will there be cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security?
No, I don't think there has to be at all. In fact, that's one of the things that, by going in and finding out where wasteful dollars are going, or where, even like a Social Security check that is still being sent out to somebody that's over 120 years old, cleaning it up. That's what our focus really is, I look at this as like a business that had bad management, and you have to come in and you have to clean up all the garbage bills that were being paid, and the slush fund that somebody had for themselves to pay for their gas, and things that didn't really weren't necessary for the business. It's the same thing with government. There's a lot of dollars that are going out from the taxpayer that are paying for things that aren't what we would all think of as important priorities. And so DOGE is giving us that information and where the funding is going, a lot of this cleanup can be done first and should be done first before any sort of cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. That doesn't need to happen. I think cleaning up the government is the most important priority.
The Pentagon just announced that it's going to cut up to 60,000 civilian positions. Now, the Defense Finance Accounting Service is headquartered over in Lawrence. Not your district, but still your state. Will there be cuts at DFAS?
Don't know all of those details yet. That's something that the new administration is working on. I know Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has an eye for cleaning up the Pentagon as well. I've got a lot of friends over at the Pentagon, and as large as that building is, it was only about 20% occupied. In fact, we're seeing that with other buildings too, that we're paying an enormous amount of rent, and it's only being occupied under 50% in some cases. So don't know what's going to happen and how it's going to affect us. My guess is most of the cleanup is going to actually happen in Washington, D.C., because that's where the bloated bureaucracies are. That's where this corruption or fraud or taking advantage of all of these, some folks, they're just taking advantage of the system because they haven't been told that they can't. And, there's an old saying in government is that if you don't spend it, you're going to lose it. And so people want to spend the money out of their budgets. That way they don't lose it in the next budget going around through the budget cycle. So I think there has to be a change in mindset with every person involved in government. How can we save dollars? How can we eliminate our deficit and ultimately our debt, which is $36 trillion, which is just hard to even comprehend how much that's going to cost the American taxpayer.
Is there a risk that some of those civilian workforce cuts at the Pentagon might impact military readiness? Because in a lot of cases, these people handle payroll processing, there are some public safety positions, HR, that sort of thing.
I don't think so. I mean, again, President Trump's top priority has been to make sure there's peace around the world. And in order to do that, you have to have a strong military. You have to have a military that's ready to defend. And also you have to have a president who's willing to go talk to the bad guys, and President Trump is willing to do that. And so we have the greatest military force in the world. Our men and women that are ready to defend our nation are well equipped, but we've also lagged behind just simply because of this malaise that's happened over time, where people aren't thinking, how can we be most efficient with tax dollars? How can we make sure that each program we're getting the best value for the amount of dollars that are being spent? And so it really has to be a mindset where we can't think about being taking advantage of the taxpayer, but how do we best use each taxpayer dollar to the best of our ability?
You have a bill in Congress called the Restoring Checks and Balances Act. What does that entail?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to this whole bloated government, bloated bureaucracy that we've seen happen over time, and it happens in corporations too. It happens in businesses as well. It's just like things life just keeps going, and all of a sudden you don't realize that, oh, we've got this program, we've got this program. Well, we don't even use that. We send checks out to this company, we don't even work with them anymore. It's just a cleanup that has to happen. So my bill that would eliminate every regulation at the end of 5 years, that every regulation would have a 5-year window, and then it would be up for renewal at the end of that 5 years, and then there would be a review, and there would be the opportunity to see if does that regulation make sense? Do we need to keep it on the books, or is it okay if it just goes away? And so too many times these regulations come in and are enacted, and they're there for years and years and are not even necessary or important to whatever industry that they may be a part of the regulatory agencies. So this is just a way to say, you know what, each regulation has a 5-year window. At the end of the 5 years, we can reevaluate and decide whether it continues on for another 5 years or if it needs to be eliminated, and we save taxpayer dollars.
I was looking over the bill text. You have some exceptions in there as well?
We do. I mean, it's not going to always be every, regulation. There's going to obviously be, you got military, there's going to be pieces there. You got, of course, the Department of Energy or IRS, and there's going to be some of those, and we want to just have an open mind to those and realize that, hey, some of these we're going to have to always have. But the broad idea is that we would simply just have most regulations. For example, they were trying to regulate the natural gas stoves. Well, obviously I opposed that and didn't think that was necessary for the Department of Energy to regulate our natural gas stoves out of existence. We were able to stop that, but it's those sort of regulations that need a sunset on them, and rather than letting the government just continue to grow and grow. It's a different day in Washington, and it's been needed for a long time. I've said that our country is coming up on its 250th birthday, and it's time for a colonoscopy. And so that's time to dig deep and look down into what actually is going on with all of the regulations. There's been an estimate of about $1.2 trillion in cost to our economy annually just by the regulations from the federal government. So we can definitely do better and make sure that our small businesses aren't over-regulated. Department of Ag is another one. Our family business works with Department of Agriculture, and there's labels that we do that are sometimes so, we'd go through 12 iterations of just trying to get a label established. And oftentimes some of those who are working for those agencies, they don't even know what the rules are. And so I think we need less regulations, not more.
As we're recording this, President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order directing the beginning of the dismantling of the Department of Education. Now, that agency handles civil rights complaints within the education system, among other things. Will dismantling that department disadvantage minority students?
No, absolutely not. In fact, a lot of times, and this is what's I think important for all of us as Americans, is where are we best served from our government? And so, we've got, of course, local government, we've got school boards, we've got state government, and of course the federal government. I think we're much better served by a local and state controlled agency rather than a federal government. And also, why should Indiana be put in a disadvantage because New York or California has more of a voice or a louder voice in Washington? We should make sure that we control our own destiny. And we're seeing states like California and Illinois that are going bankrupt. That's not the type of leadership that is good for the entire country. It's the states like Indiana where we're conservative and we are making sure that we have a balanced budget and we have a responsive state government. I think Governor Braun's doing a remarkable job making sure that we are always going to be there for people's complaints and issues. I mean, we deal with those complaints in our office, and we want to be helpful wherever we can because we don't want people that are disadvantaged not to have a voice. In fact, we actually make sure that we're very available and accessible, and I think that's more important, to be accessible across the country rather than just a big, concrete building in Washington, D.C.
Do you plan to push for eliminating the department as part of the budget negotiations we talked about earlier?
I don't know what Speaker Johnson and the leadership, what their plans are. This is new news with the president signing an executive order to dissolve the Department of Education. We, as conservatives, have talked about that for a long time, always believing that the states are better, we're all better served with the states managing our education system rather than Washington trying to do a one-size-fits-all. But I anticipate that we will try to codify that. That way the executive order can't be changed by a future president.
Congressman Marlin Stutzman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman, who represents Northeast Indiana. Remember, you can watch All Indiana Politics every Sunday morning at 9:30, only on Wish TV. I'm Garrett Bergquist. Thanks for listening.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.